You're listening to the Live Free podcast. I'm your host, Christine, certified life coach, pain to power mentor, and creator of Embody You Mindset Mastery School. I'm here today to discuss living life after disease, disaster, or adversity, to discuss living life fully once again, a life of hope, peace, and resiliency, a life fully embodied. I utilize the lessons that I learned going through not one, but two primary cancers. I'm here today to guide you to the life of your dreams, turn your pain into power, and lead you back to yourself. Welcome. So today I want to talk about saying no more, about setting boundaries and conserving your energy. Many different schools of thought and motivational speakers talk about the opposite. They talk about saying yes more, getting your to-do list done, just getting started, and the like. And what I want to differentiate here is that for some people, that is a necessary motivational talk to listen to. For people like me, that is not the case. Because chances are, while I'm listening to that podcast telling me to just get off the couch, I'm already off the couch. I'm listening to a podcast, I'm doing 6 things, and I'm moving and shaking as I'm doing them. So, what ended up happening to me is that through all of my research on action, do, I landed up stressed and potentially landed up sick as a result. So if you are very much the person who's always moving, always going, and can't relax, then this episode is for you. If you're the person who needs that jolt of energy, maybe not the episode for you. Because I want to talk about relaxing and setting aside time for rest, learning how to say no, setting boundaries with friends and family, overwhelm, pushing, flow state, all of those types of things. So this really showed up for me when I was going through my cancer journey. When I was feeling extremely ill, I couldn't do things. And that, even now, is very difficult for me. My mind was there. I wanted to do things. I just physically couldn't. And I had to ask people for help. And that was extremely uncomfortable for me. So through necessity, through days where I couldn't, I had to let people help me. And what I found was I started to enjoy, with a side of guilt, being able to just sit, being able to say to my friends and my family, I can't come to this thing or do this thing. And my life went from engaged and crazy to peaceful and flowing. So while many people were telling me, oh, I'm so sorry that you have cancer, I'm so sorry that you're sick, I had this feeling of like this secret guilt because I was enjoying relaxing and not being so busy alongside being very, very sick, yes, but I was so enjoying just being able to relax. for once. So coming out of my treatment now, there's been a lot of fear around going back into my life. A lot of people have asked me, how do you feel afterwards? And I would say one of the biggest things that have come into my mind frame is this fear of going back to this really busy, really engaged, really pushing personality that I had prior to this. And that has been so scary. So I have to be very intentional moving forward to do the things that I'm about to talk about now. Because I think that there's many different parts to healing. And for me, healing this person who nothing was ever enough, ever, has been one of the biggest lessons, has been one of the biggest healings. That compassion, that gentleness, and that kindness that I was so needing has been something that has set me free. And I'm still working on it. And it is practice. So everything that I'm sharing with you now is everything that I can think of that I have learned and that I am currently implementing into my life. Okay, so I've got a couple steps here. The first one is how to say no. So this is not an area that I was at all comfortable with. Someone says, hey, do you want to come over for a fire later? My answer is always yes, whether or not I have the time or I feel for it or whatever else. My answer is yes, because I panic and I don't know what to say. So yes, hey, can you work for me on Saturday? Yeah, for sure. I mean, never mind the fact that I've got a billion things on the weekend planned, but I'll find a way just so that you can relax. Sound familiar? So, some ways that have been really helpful for me to say no. If you are not feeling like you're comfortable with just flat out saying no, there are some statements that I've started to utilize that have been really beneficial to me. So if you want to say no, then you can say something along the lines of, that sounds really great. I've set aside some time for catching up on things around my home. Or, thank you so much, but I've set aside some me time. That would be a great way to show that you are self-preserving. And how much respect would you have for that person, I think, who said that to you? Like if you said, hey, can you come help me around the house? And someone said, I would, but I have set aside some time to take care of myself that day. I think I would probably like, wow, that's good for you. That's how I would feel. But if you're not comfortable with that, then one that really works for me is saying something along the lines of, okay, thank you very much. Let me chew on this and I'll get back to you. And then from there, once you've stepped back from kind of that panic moment, you're able to rework and redecide whether or not that's something that you do in fact want to do. If you've got something that you'd like to tell them that you're not able to, a plausible, real, and truthful excuse, or something along those lines. But I find that just saying yes, it can be so draining on a person. And I myself have had to learn to utilize some of these statements. And one that I would caution you against would be to say, I can't, I'm busy. And the reason why is because whether it's true or not, if you identify as busy all the time, then you will continually perpetuate busy. And this is something that I've been very guilty of. If I could say no, it was always because of the word busy. And that's not someone who I want to be anymore. So why would I perpetuate that? So I would caution you against the word busy because it may give you a sense of purpose, but it also drains your energy. Okay? So putting your self-care first, utilizing these statements and putting your self-care first. So ways that I had to put my self-care first was to be very intentional about rest. And I have continued to do so. So what do I mean by that? I mean along the lines of tonight I am watching a movie. Tonight I am having a bath. Whatever works for you, all of it is applicable. But setting aside intentional rest is so much more valuable than being tired and worn out and I can't do this, but still trying to push through. Because two things. One, your productivity will be absolute shit. I've learned that from experience. And two, most of the time, you end up procrastinating because you're so tired. And that usually comes in the form of spiraling through your phone or talking on the phone with somebody or re-cleaning something or. And the thing that you wanted to get done just keeps getting pushed back. So now you've had an entire evening, which you intended on getting things done, even though you were tired. And one, you haven't gotten the thing done. And two, you've made yourself feel even worse because you procrastinated it. So why not set aside that intentional rest? Not something I was good at. I was often the person who did the spiraling on the phone and then regretted it. Every good business plan, every good job, every good friendship, marriage, everything plans in rest. So why do we think that if we just keep pushing, we'll be more special than the next, that we will be the one person who slips in and gets it done? I'm sorry, but we're not as special as we think. You need to set aside time for rest, setting that boundary for yourself and others. Something that was brought up to me during my journey from my counselor was HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And that makes so much sense to me. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, then know that whatever comes after that is going to be not valuable, not useful, and not productive. So being intentional on having compassion for yourself in that moment and eating the food, talking about the thing, calling up a good friend, or having a rest. What follows after that will be 10 times more productive than pushing through. In regards to flow state only happens when we are feeling good, whole, and together. pushing mimics flow state in the sense that from the outsider's perspective, it looks like you are working and getting things done. But you are not in flow. Flow is when time just elapses and suddenly you look at it and you can't believe what time it is. And you've gotten so much done and you're looking back and you feel so full, so vibrant. Pushing is where every single minute feels like a drag and you need to take a break and you can't get on to the next step and all of those sorts of things. And if you're feeling that while trying to complete a task, I can almost guarantee you that you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And that you have to set aside that time so that you can have that rest and come into flow state later. Because if you have that rest, flow state will get things done 10 times better than before. Now, these are the things that I have had to learn, and not easily. The amount of time that I have wasted being overwhelmed by having way too much on the go and pushing anyway would shock you. And the way I describe it is like walking through whipped cream. When you walk through air, there is no resistance. But picture walking through whipped cream. There would be a little bit of resistance, but not so much so that you can't get through it. And what I find is a good portion of my 20s, I was walking through whipped cream. So that little bit of resistance at all corners has been my constant companion. And what a sad way to do things. When all I needed was a me night. A night for me. For me, that's baths or movies. I love those things. One night of that and I'm good to go. But yet, a huge portion of the last 10 years have been spent with me pushing, and then breaking. And that has come out in all sorts of ways. In crying fits, in anger, in confusion, in ways that, I ended up feeling embarrassed or shameful about. And all I needed to do was take a me night. But yet I didn't do it. And I'm grateful to my cancer for that. This has been a really huge shift for me, is learning to set aside time. It's so unbelievably important and so, so rare, especially in my world. So overwhelm is the final stage. When you're feeling overwhelmed, a friend of mine was talking to me the other day and she was saying how her home feels impossible. Her family life seems impossible. Everything just seems impossible. So she's done nothing because she just feels that she should be better, that she should be more on top of things, that other mums are more on top of things, and she just isn't. And she's beating herself up about it. Sound familiar? And what I said to her was, number 1, cut yourself some slack. Number 2, take some intentional rest. And then number 3, begin your action. So what does that look like? So cut yourself some slack. Everyone who she's comparing herself to are people that she is not in their homes. She has no idea how they're handling it. Maybe it's because they set aside intentional rest. And for that reason, they're very balanced. Or maybe it's because they portray a balanced person, but they fall apart every 5 days, just like I was doing. Either way, comparison will always leave you feeling that you are less, because you do not have the whole story. Second is setting aside intentional rest. So for her, it could be anything from as small as a night where husband takes the kids and she watches a movie and shuts the door. I have another friend who calls them bed days, where she will just lay in bed for a couple hours alone in the dark. And hubby takes the kids. And that's also so appropriate and so helpful. Intentional rest could be as far as taking a weekend away. You know, in her example, hubby could take the kids for the weekend and she could go blow off some steam. But can you see how if you don't put the intention behind the rest, then you are instead just kind of procrastinating the pain. So you're spiraling through your phone because you don't want to be weak and need rest. But what's happening is that you feel no better. You are still in such an unhappy state. You've wasted a bunch of time and gotten nothing done. And now you're back to comparison. Okay? So say she takes this rest and she's very intentional about her rest and she comes back and she feels good. Whether that's a couple hours, a couple days. She comes back. What I find works for me, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, now this is more on the action side, but if I'm feeling overwhelmed after I've had the rest, very important. After I've had the rest, what I'll do is I'll pick a corner. So I'll pick a corner of my desk, a corner of the house, a corner of the yard, and I will just start with something. And I will not move on from that room, that corner, that area until every single thing in that area has been completed. Then I will move and I'll do every single thing in that area until it's completed. And then that way, by the time that you get from the south end of your house to the north end of your house, you've completed everything. If you only get from the south end to the middle, then you know that everything from the middle onwards is completed. And then you can start off the next day in the middle. But it's this trying to do 6 things at once that we get nothing done. So this goes back to presence. Okay. So to recap, what are some practical steps to coming out of overwhelm? Saying no, conserving your energy, and setting boundaries. Number 1 is say no. Say no more often, and always, always, always think about whether or not you would like to do something or whether or not you're people-pleasing. 2 is put your self-care first. So spend time being intentional about your self-care. Setting aside intentional time to relax in whatever way fits for you. Cut yourself some slack. Be respectful of who you are and what you need. Stop comparing. And finally, when you are in a state of overwhelm, after you've completed all of those steps, only then begin with being very intentional about whatever task you are doing. Don't do 6 of them, just do 1. Complete that, scratch that, and then move on to the next thing. So I myself will be going back and listening to this podcast, and I will think to myself, wow, that's a really good idea, Christine. Because this is an area that I'm still working on. And that is being intentional about my rest, my boundaries, and my needs. So I hope that you found this episode educational and helpful. And I hope that you go out and you live with compassion, love, kindness, and gentleness for yourself, and that you live free. Thanks so much, you guys. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. If you found expansion with this last episode, then that means that others will too. And the best way to get the word out about the podcast is by leaving a review. I would be so grateful if you could leave me a review and let me know how you felt about the podcast. Included in the show notes will be everything that we talked about today, including all of my transformative programs. Change is just on the horizon, my friend.